Kate is a licensed psychologist. She serves as the director of research and outcomes at OCD anxiety centers. She received her doctoral training in clinical psychology at American University and developed specialties in the treatment of anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive and related disorders, and body focused repetitive behaviors. Dr. Rogers has worked with OCD anxiety centers since 2016, holding direct clinical training and quality assurance and compliance roles. As director of research and outcomes, she collects and analyzes data to improve clinical outcomes and collaborates with universities and researchers across the country to help close the gap between science and practice. Now, this is a two-part CE today. We're going to be covering part one of OCD and anxiety, what community providers need to know. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to Kate.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to present to y'all today. Joseph pointed out how many people joined us today, and I am so flattered and excited that so many of you are interested in learning about anxiety and about OCD. I think that is such a helpful thing in our field right now to gain more and more knowledge about this. Just a few weeks ago, the International OCD Foundation published a updated white paper article on kind of the state of things in our little pocket of the field. And it was a really sobering paper, to be honest. And it really conveyed how often clients don't get the treatment they need, that are suffering with things like OCD, and they don't even get the diagnoses that are accurate and appropriate for them. And I'm talking like over 80% of clients suffering from OCD did not get an appropriate diagnosis and did not get the appropriate treatment. It was really a sobering article to read as someone that's really dedicated their career to this pocket of the field. And so I attended a roundtable discussion shortly after this paper came out with some of the experts in the field talking about, uh-oh, we're not doing a good enough job. Consensus was really train more people, get this information out there, support community providers, and help us all come together to help this client population. And so it's really satisfying that right on the heels of that, so many of you show up today, and I appreciate it. It really touches my heart. So thank you for being here, and I'm so excited to share this with you today. The topic of our training, and again, it's a two-part training, so we're going to take our time going through the material today. I want you to feel welcome to ask questions. Joseph is going to help me notice questions that come in through the chatty chat window. Um, our topic is anxiety and OCD, and specifically what our community providers need to know to support these populations. And so we're going to look at this from a few different angles. When we leave from our two parts together, I want everyone to feel really confident that they understand the nature of OCD and anxiety, meaning not just like what is the diagnostic criteria, but really understand what's happening in your client's brains and why that is resulting in the symptoms that you see. And I also want everyone to feel really confident in clear hallmark features to look for when you're screening for a range of these diagnoses, so that we can, as a field, get better at catching this and diagnosing it appropriately, getting our clients one step closer to the best possible care. I also am going to take some time and walk through evidence-based care for OCD and anxiety disorders, not only what it is, but how and why it works. I think that is so important. All too often, we as a field kind of get stuck in buzzwords, right? Like we know the right word to say, but we don't really understand what's behind it. And I want everyone to leave here feeling so much more confident that they understand the how and the why behind the evidence-based care for these disorders. And by the end of our two-part series, I want to make sure that everyone walks away with an actionable list of do's and don'ts of how to best support this community of clients that suffer with anxiety disorders and OCD. I'm very much like an action-oriented person. I'm a behaviorist at heart. And so I don't want us to just kind of seep in the knowledge. I want us to be able to walk away with something where we feel like we can make a difference. Who's excited? Are we excited? I can only see some of you. I love that some of you raised your hand. That was really nice. Okay, so let's jump right in. Oh, I love the emojis. Like, keep those coming, y'all. Those fuel me. We're going to jump right into understanding the nature of anxiety. I have always found this so incredibly helpful because it's not actually all that complicated at the end of the day. When I think about the nature of anxiety, I like to think about an alarm clock because we all understand the basics of how an alarm clock works, right? Now, it doesn't look like this anymore, this cute little cartoon guy. It looks more like this, like our cell phones. This is how our alarm clocks work now, but it's the same exact concept, which I think is really interesting. So, how an alarm clock works, right? You set the time for when you need to wake up. When that time comes, the alarm goes off, sending a crystal clear message. It's time to wake up. And then, what you do with that message is up to you in your own personality. I don't really know your lives, but the system works really well. Set it for the time you need to wake up. Time comes, alarm goes off, clear message, it's time to wake up. Now, because we use our cell phones now, for the most part, for our alarm clocks, it has always really struck me. I'm curious, show of hands, has anyone ever fallen for the trap of setting your alarm clock, little toony tune, to like your favorite song and then ruined your favorite song forever? A lot of us have fallen for that trap. And that is fascinating to me. Not the ruining of the song, like that was sad. I have ruined my favorite song. But what's fascinating is that regardless of the toony tune that you set it to, the alarm clock always sends the exact same crystal clear message. It's time to wake up. Which is why once you tie your favorite song to your alarm clock and then you hear your favorite song, what you actually hear is it's time to wake up. And now your favorite song is ruined. But doesn't the alarm clock work so flawlessly? The message is always crystal clear. Our brains are amazing at this. Now, what's interesting about anxiety is that our anxiety alarm works in a really similar way. It looks like this. And what's most similar is that when the anxiety alarm goes off, it sends a crystal clear message. The alarm going off is right about here where it says perceived threat. When our brain perceives a threat, our anxiety alarm goes off, sending a crystal clear message, danger. Now, to really understand how the anxiety alarm works and how this can turn into a cycle, I'm a metaphor person. Do I have any other metaphor people here? There's like 200 of you. I've got to have some. Cool. So you're going to enjoy this. And if you're not a metaphor person, settle in. It's going to be a long hour. So, imagination hats on. Boop. I boop. You don't have to boop. I want you to imagine for a moment that, does anybody like hiking? Some people like hiking. Some people are neutral. Does anybody hate hiking? There's always like at least a couple of people that hate hiking. Cool. Okay, so if you love hiking, I want you to imagine that you are hiking down your very favorite trail. Like take a moment, really imagine all the details. If you hate hiking, you are just walking to your car, but like imagine all the details. You just walk into your car. Now, are you imagining it? All of a sudden, for no good reason at all, out from behind a rock or a tree or a sprinter van, I don't know your life, out jumps a giant, hungry, angry looking Grizzly bear. Uh-oh. Thank you for the emoji. That was perfection. Now you are standing about 3 feet from this grizzly bear. This guy does not look friendly, right? He's doing the like grizzly bear loomy thing, like the classic roar. Okay. The bear is our trigger here. And our brain is going to perceive a threat, right? Our brain is going to say, well, this bear is going to eat my face. And our alarm is going to go off, sending a crystal clear message, danger, 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 bear's going to eat my face. Now, I am curious. How would you feel? Open your chatty chat window. Type, type it in. How would you feel? Yikes. Scared, terrified, afraid, panic. Love these. So, we have a range of emotions. In general, anxiety, like our anxiety alarm has gone off and said you're in danger. So that's the range of emotion. Now, when our brain perceives a threat, what is happening is our sympathetic nervous system is turning on. And when our sympathetic nervous system turns on, it dumps into our body delightful chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol, which are all working together to create these emotions, and we feel the feels. And the first tool that I think is really valuable to use here is something called the Subjective Units of Distress Scale. For short, SUDS. And if you work with teenagers, they're like, that was really sudsy, and I think that's adorable. The SUDS, the Subjective Units of Distress Scale, is a 0 to 10. We use 0 to 10. It can be 0 to 100. Doesn't really matter. It's subjective. We use a 0 to 10, where 0 is no anxiety at all, peachy keen, hey, how you doing? To 10, where bro's eyeballs are clearly going to explode. I too have a sick kid at home right now. So, we use this scale because everyone experiences their feelings a little bit differently. And one of the things to be very thoughtful about in evaluating someone with anxiety is don't fall into the trap of assumptions. Because we all, as human beings, experience the same emotions, it's very easy to fall into assumptions here. The SUD scale is the first point where we can check ourselves and match the individual human in front of us. So, right now, you're the individual human. You've got a grizzly bear in front of you. You've said how you would feel. Now, I'd like you to give it a number 0 to 10. Put it in the chatty chat window. How big would that feeling be for you? I see some tens. I see some nines. A couple of you tried to break my scale. You can't go above the 10. I saw a 7 in there. I might have seen an 85, same rule. Now, there's an 8. Isn't this so interesting? Those of you that said 10 are probably very surprised to see anything other than a 10. And that is always so important. That is the essence of why we use this scale. Do not assume you know how big this person's emotion is. Don't assume you can read it. Ask them. You will often be surprised by the answer. So, grizzly bear's in front of you. You feel the feels. You all feel a little bit differently, but you're all generally in this range. Like, you don't feel great. It's pretty intense. Nobody's on this row. And then I'm going to go ahead and assume that because you've all made it this far into adulthood, you have the will to survive. And if you have the will to survive in this moment where your anxiety alarm is going off and you're feeling the big feels, you're also going to experience this urge bubbling up to do something. The urge to neutralize the threat of the bear eating your face. And so Now be honest with yourselves. What would you do? What would you do? Put it in the chatty chat window. I love people's facial expressions in that moment on the cameras where they're like, "Oh gosh, I'm gonna get eaten by this bear." What would you do? I see run, I see freeze. Somebody's yelling at the bear. Someone's really clear that they're running, but they're running really fast. Run and probably get caught, play dead, curl into a ball, scream, find a big stick, hold my breath, get big. Look at the range of behaviors here. I love how honest y'all are being too. I appreciate that. Now, all of these behaviors, I often hear run. By the way, do not run from a grizzly bear unless you're legit an Olympian. Again, don't know your life. You could be, but like I don't recommend the running. It's probably going to catch you. All of these behaviors, though, would fall under the label of what we call neutralizing behaviors. This is one of my very favorite terms. It is so incredibly helpful. A neutralizing behavior is any behavior that tries to neutralize a perceived threat. So, on our little diagram here, you're going from here, it has to connect some way, even in the most nonsensical way, to here. This behavior tries to neutralize this perceived threat. That is a neutralizing behavior. Other words for neutralizing behavior out there: compulsions, rituals, safety behaviors, avoidance. All of these fall into the category of neutralizing behaviors. And a neutralizing behavior is any behavior that tries to neutralize a perceived threat. You might notice how much I emphasize the word tries, like bold, underline, italicize. I'm kind of obnoxious about it because running is still a neutralizing behavior. You're probably gonna get eaten unless you have a slower friend with you, but it still counts as a neutralizing behavior. Oftentimes in the field, we get really mixed up because we think about things like compulsions as something that makes you feel better, something that makes your distress go down. But it's not what it is. That's a really outdated way of understanding it. The blunt reality is, most of the time, a compulsion, a neutralizing behavior doesn't make you feel better. Most of the time, it actually spikes your distress almost immediately. It doesn't even temporarily make you feel better. And so it's a really unhelpful definition. Instead, we look at a neutralizing behavior being any behavior that tries to neutralize that perceived threat, whether or not it works. It's the intention behind it. And why that's important is because every single time we engage in a neutralizing behavior, we always learn the same thing. We confirm that the threat is real. We learn very strongly through our own behaviors. And when we engage in a neutralizing behavior, we learn strongly that thing's dangerous. So, well, wrong way. Lesson learned. Bears are dangerous. Look how well that system works. It's so great. Our anxiety system is not the enemy. Our anxiety system is like our very best friend. Truly, this cycle here is responsible for the survival of the species. Because you know what? That bear is going to eat your face. And bears are dangerous. And this is what our anxiety system is really for. This is what our anxiety alarm is for. And it's designed in just the most brilliant way so that when we engage in a neutralizing behavior, we don't need the bear to hurt us to learn the bear is dangerous. We can learn that through our own behavior. Simply by trying to neutralize that threat, we learn bears are dangerous. And each time we do that, the connections get tighter and stronger, and the alarm gets tighter. This is great, right? except when it's not. So let's think about this for a moment. Our anxiety alarm is just like our alarm clock, right? So what happens when we have a busted alarm clock? Imagine it for a moment. Put your imagination hat back on, boop. Imagine for a moment the same alarm you use in the morning to wake up, the exact same tuney tune, the same volume and intensity, right? That same exact alarm goes off about every hour, all night long, sending a crystal clear message. It's time to wake up. 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 It's not time to wake up, though. It's the middle of the night. But the message is always the same and crystal clear. It's time to wake up. And your brain is going to respond to that every single time, all night long. It's time to wake up. How quickly are you going to throw your phone out the window? For me, it's going to be pretty quick. Because what you have there is a busted alarm. That's all it is. It's a busted alarm. It's a false alarm. It's going off telling you it's time to wake up when it is not, in fact, time to wake up. It's lying. It's just a busted alarm. It's not actually all that more complicated. You got busted alarm. So, our anxiety alarm is susceptible to the same thing, becoming a false alarm. An anxiety alarm that is wound really tight is more susceptible to going off as a false alarm, screaming danger when there in fact is no danger. But the message is always exactly the same. You're in danger. This is your grizzly bear alarm. We all agreed how we would feel when faced with a grizzly bear. That's the alarm going off. So when our anxiety alarm goes off as a false alarm, everything is exactly the same. Look at it. Let's go back and forth. It's fun. What is changing in these two slides? Only one thing is changing. Absolutely nothing else. Grizzly bear, teddy bear, grizzly bear, teddy bear. But everything else is identical. Look, these guys, this guy's eyes still exploding. This is the amount of anxiety and distress we're feeling, the same as being 3 feet away from a grizzly bear. It's going to eat our face. And so the urge to neutralize is the same, and the neutralizing behavior is the same. You're still running for it, you're screaming, you're grabbing a stick, you're making yourself big. It's a teddy bear, y'all. But it doesn't matter. The anxiety alarm is going off. It's simply going off as a false alarm, a busted alarm. This is at the core. This idea of a false alarm is at the core of OCD and all of our anxiety disorders. And this is such a helpful thing to recognize because without that, you can get so caught up in all the minutia of diagnostic criteria. The most important thing to recognize is the false alarm. It really helps conceptualize a client's suffering and understand why they're getting worse instead of better. Because every time we engage in a neutralizing behavior, we confirm that the threat is real and we tighten the alarm. And a really tight alarm is more susceptible to going off as a false alarm. This is not an exhaustive list, but I think it's a helpful list. And it's many things that are often misunderstood, missed as diagnoses, not given the appropriate treatment that is really going to help set them up for success. All of these diagnoses have a false alarm at the core. I'm going to pause there for just a moment. Joseph, do we have any questions that we need to address from the chat?
I think we're good. Did anyone have anything that they wanted to ask at this point in time? It looks like there was a question earlier about whether or not we were talking about the parasympathetic nervous system or the nervous system, but I think we got that one answered. I think we were talking about the sympathetic nervous system at the time.
Absolutely. So the autonomic nervous system has two sister systems within it, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is that like fight or flight that dumps the adrenaline and the cortisol into the system. It's what clicks on when the alarm goes off. And the parasympathetic nervous system is that sister system that calms the system back down. And they kind of teeter-totter.
We do have a couple questions that just came in. Lindsay's asking, would OCPD fall under this category as well?
That is a great question. I would say mostly no. Mostly OCPD is kind of its own beast with its own set of criteria. There is some false alarm at play there, but it's not as like centric to the diagnosis. And there are so many other components to OCPD that you want to make sure to think about it a little bit more broadly. But there is some false alarm there as well. That's a great question. Are there other
Another,
questions?
let's see. It looks like Kevin, did you have a question? It looks
Yeah,
like you, yeah, go
I
ahead.
was just yeah, I was wondering about the breaking of the alarm. So like yeah, if it so every time we perceive a threat or and the alarm clock tightens up, right? And then basically you're saying that it could get wound up so tight that it could just like break. And is that what
So
you
the
were
tighter the alarm gets, the more
yeah,
likely it is to go off, right? And so when it's too tight, it can go off as a false alarm. And the idea of a broken alarm is a false alarm, right? Anytime
okay.
you've got an alarm going off when it doesn't need to, like that's a busted alarm. But it's not like there's this one specific point where it like explodes. Although that picture was dramatic.
So like how do we like my question is how do we go from like a real threat, like a real bear, to like it becoming like just like a little teeny weeny cub and we perceive that as it's going to eat our face and it's a false alarm.
So I'm gonna answer that question like two steps back
Okay.
of like why does this happen to someone in the first place, right? Because in
Yeah.
general, like we mostly know like a grizzly bear from a baby cute bear. And we also know that if there's a baby cute bear, there's a mama bear back there. So like don't mess with that still. Your alarm should probably still go off in a different way. But if the question is like, why would one person have a false alarm versus another? There's a few different ways it's important to understand how this might happen. One is genetics. And a lot of the things on the screen right now have pretty strong genetic ties. OCD is one of them. OCD is wildly genetic, tends to run in families. We have a lot of really fascinating research to support that. Um, so genetics is one definite place we want to look. Some people just like are born with the switch for OCD, and there's a variety of things that can flip it on and cause the symptoms to start. And then once the symptoms start, because one of those symptoms is compulsions, just another word for neutralizing behaviors, it gets worse and worse over time. So that's why we see that ramp up. But there are other things that can cause this too. One is our experiences, right? PTSD is a really great example of this. If someone has PTSD, at one point they were experiencing a traumatic event or even a series of traumatic events. I always say, imagine living in a war zone, and every time you hear a loud noise, you hit the deck. And that's a good idea. But every time you hit the deck, the alarm gets tighter. And the alarm needs to be tighter because we want a tight alarm in that um, really risky situation, right? Where your life is at risk. We want our alarm to go off really, really quickly. That's how we survive it. PTSD, though, is once you're no longer in that life-threatening situation,
Yeah.
the alarm is still exactly as tight because of all
Okay.
the smart things you had to do to survive it. And then the last one, and I always bring this up because I think as you learn about these things, it's important to think of it through an ethical lens. You can do this to somebody. Does anybody remember the story of little Albert? John Watson's experiment with the small child and like bunnies. So they created a phobia of small fluffy objects, small fluffy animals in a small child. That was the experiment. We tend to learn about this in like an ethics class. We're like, that's a no-no, that we don't do that sort of thing in our field anymore. But it's an important one to keep in the back of your mind. You can create this from scratch through the same process. Every time you engage in a neutralizing behavior, you tighten the alarm. So if you can get somebody to neutralize against something that's safe over and over again, you can create a phobia in that person. And so we want to be very, very thoughtful in recognizing the power of these sorts of tools and understandings and always navigate them very, very ethically, very, very thoughtfully. Yeah, Kevin.
And so do we want to be careful of how often we're neutralizing? Do we want to try to use our coping skills and be more mindful of this?
Maybe it depends on what you're neutralizing, right? Because again, our anxiety system is not the enemy. It keeps us safe, it keeps us alive, responsible for the survival of the species. And yeah, we probably neutralize for things we don't need to. I would say the most classic example, and this one like hurt me. Like this one stung when I was a grad student, actually. I had already been, I had completed, basic training in things like hypnosis, and um, I understood the power of deep breathing. And when I started training as an exposure therapist, treating OCD and anxiety disorders, what I learned was that's great and all, and oftentimes, when we have our clients do certain coping strategies, what we're ultimately teaching them is that their feelings are dangerous and we're tightening an alarm. And so we
Mm.
do really want to be thoughtful through that angle of like recognizing neutralizing behaviors for what they are and what they teach us, not because they're bad. Never think of them as bad. Sometimes they're fabulous. The only thing we really know every time is that we are learning about danger when we do a neutralizing behavior. And so if you don't want someone to learn about danger, if you don't want yourself to learn about danger in that moment, neutralizing behavior is probably not the best choice. It's a great question, and it's a tricky one.
Cody has his hand up.
Go, Cody.
Hey,
Oh, there's Cody.
good to see you, Kate.
Hi, Cody.
I just wanted to share really quickly my experience of OCD to hopefully give you guys some perspective on this. So I'm a provider for OCD and a lot of other things, but I've suffered from OCD since I was a little kid. So one of the things to really pay attention to is that it is an absolute intolerance of uncertainty. So really what you're looking for with your clients is that they're trying to get 100% certainty in what their compulsions are trying to get 100% certainty. So the experience of OCD can literally be like, I remember when I was a lot younger, it felt like I felt like there was a button in the brain, which is like what Kate is talking about, the nervous system that reacts. It felt like to me somebody spilled like Pepsi or something on it and it was sticky. So my thoughts got stuck and I couldn't get off a certain thought. So it started cycling, cycling, cycling. So that's the obsessive piece. Then the compulsive piece is really trying to neutralize it, get rid of it, push it away, avoid it. So what I experienced with OCD is it was like being pulled thousands of feet underwater in the ocean. So when you're talking to a client that has OCD, recognize there's different levels of insight. So for me, even times when I've been a therapist, I've had my OCD overcome me, and it's pulled me so deep that it's black. So you can't see what direction to swim. So the compulsion is always what seems like their way to be rescued is I have to do this, I have to neutralize. So actually the whole thing that's the problem is the compulsion. The compulsion is the complete problem. So my experience with it has been when you really identify this with clients, notice the difference between generalized anxiety and OCD is what are you trying to do to neutralize it? Usually generalized anxiety is worry, worry, worry. So I would say, and I just want to kind of throw this out there, Kate, I don't want to take too much time, but the thing that I've recognized that really helped me with OCD was exposures. Yes, those are helpful. But for me, it was ACT. It was Buddhist meditation. It was really connecting with my values and forgive me here, but OCD. That's what I reached was you get a point where these people have to really get to a point where they tell OCD to off. I'm not listening to you anymore. And then that cycle starts to slow and you interrupt it and the brain goes back to normal. It doesn't so it's not as dangerous as it was. It's amazing. So I still deal with my OCD daily. It's still there. It can still overcome me and pull me back in the water, but treatment for OCD is like rising in that water. And you're like, I don't know why I'm rising in the water, but I am. And it's badass. So anyway, that's my take on it. So don't doubt that these people are in enormous trauma and suffering. Be kind.
We're going to jump more into the treatment side of things a little bit later, but I really want to highlight one of the things that Cody is really conveying is the intensity of a false alarm. And that's really important. And that's one of the reasons why I use the grizzly bear metaphor, because oftentimes watching someone's reaction to something that seems so nothing can feel very jarring, both to the provider and to the client's family. And so I really encourage using things like that grizzly bear metaphor to show everybody understands anxiety. The experience someone's going to have standing in front of a grizzly bear is the exact same alarm going off in our clients that are suffering from things like OCD and anxiety disorders. And we'll dive more into the specifics of the treatment a little bit later. Do we have more questions? Or should we keep on going, Joseph?
We had a couple others that came in through the chat. Someone asked, where does analysis paralysis fall under?
I think that's very similar to something Cody was saying, actually. So, what I want to point out here is, let me go back to this slide. Neutralizing behaviors. Neutralizing behaviors, when we talk about a grizzly bear, right? A lot of the answers people were giving were very overt behaviors, right? I'm going to run, I'm going to grab a stick, I'm going to scream. But it's important to recognize that neutralizing behaviors can also be mental acts, right? Oftentimes we just don't control what comes into our brain. And we can be very intentional with what we're doing with our brain at the same time. And so this idea of analysis paralysis could fall under a mental neutralizing behavior. And we saw there was one person, I have no idea who it was at this point, but I saw it pop up on the screen when I said, "What would you do? There's a bear in front of you," and they said, "Pray." That could be a mental neutralizing behavior. This might be utterly silent. Nobody knows you're doing it, but it would be considered a behavior. And so be really thoughtful when you're looking at neutralizing behaviors that this could be an overt behavior and a very covert, silent mental behavior, like praying, like trying to cancel out a thought, bringing a specific image into your mind, or just desperately trying to figure something out and find that special magical certainty that Cody referenced that doesn't exist. And so it's this never-ending analysis with this desperation behind it that goes nowhere because what they're trying to find is this special magical certainty, and it's just not an option on the table. So oftentimes that would fall right there under neutralizing behavior. And same thing, every time we do it, we learn more and more strongly that that thing is dangerous. Was there one more, Joseph?
There was. Jessica asked, she's heard that OCD has super high comorbidity with neurodivergence. Is that
Yeah,
true?
that's super true. And that's true with so many things, right? Like we're finding as a field how common neurodivergence is. Like the divergence, maybe not such an appropriate term at this point. But the idea behind neurodivergence, if you really, really boil it down, um, the part of it that feels really relevant to OCD is that this is someone who learns differently than the average person. And that's very important to consider because notice how many times I've said the word learn, just as we've been talking about the false alarm idea. And so the treatment we're going to talk about is a learning-based treatment. And if you have a client with comorbid neurodivergence, then it's really helpful to pay attention to how does that individual human learn best so that you can be thoughtful about that and set them up for success in treatment. And I'll pause us there and jump back in here for a moment. So we've talked a lot about OCD, but a false alarm is not only at the core of OCD, and I really want to just walk through some hallmark features. I think we don't all memorize the DSM, right? And we probably shouldn't. I memorized the DSM once to pass my clinical comprehensive exams in grad school and felt so confident in this. And then I took my licensure exam in 2015. Do you know what happened in 2015? We got a new DSM, like a super new DSM, and I had to redo the whole thing. So memorizing things like the DSM aren't actually all that helpful. Um, I find this idea of hallmark features to be especially helpful in flagging certain disorders, screening for certain disorders, and supporting differential diagnosis. So here are my hallmark features, what each of these things really boils down to that helps set them apart from each other and apart from other things. For OCD, it's obsessions and compulsions. Obsessions are these sticky, intrusive thoughts. I love how Cody described it as sticky. And it almost feels like you're drowning in them. And they come with this really, really high distress because these are intrusive, unwanted thoughts that are really counter to who you actually are as a person. And so they cause a lot of distress. They can be really disturbing. They can be thoughts, images, urges, but they are intrusive by nature. And then compulsions, just another word for neutralizing behaviors because academia is a silly, silly place and everybody needs to make their mark and use their own word. So we have like 8,000 different words to mean the same thing. It's a neutralizing behavior. This can get very tricky though with diagnoses like PTSD that also has intrusion symptoms, right? That's like the name of the category. It also has neutralizing behaviors, avoidance symptoms. And so don't get too caught up in it, but know that OCD needs both obsessions and compulsions. And oftentimes those compulsions can, in fact, be mental compulsions. Body dysmorphic disorder, I think, often doesn't get enough attention. And these are clients that are often really high risk. And hide so they don't present to treatment. So I want you to be ready to flag this when you see it. Body dysmorphic disorder is characterized by a distorted perceived flaw in physical appearance. So just to zoom in on the important parts of this, distorted perceived flaw, right? If someone is just really fixated on a physical flaw that is objectively real, it is not BDD. That is something else. In BDD, they are looking in the mirror and they see something that's actually not there. Something super magnified. They see an image very different than what other people see. And they get stuck. So typically, like we've all zoomed in, we've all looked in the mirror and zoomed in on that thing we don't like. Like if you haven't, one, I don't believe you, and two, I would love to live your life, but I don't actually believe you. We've all zoomed in on a physical flaw. And then most of us automatically zoom back out and see the whole picture and the whole person. Someone with BDD, they have this distortion in their perceived flaw. They zoom in and hyper focus on it, and their brain does not automatically zoom back out. They get stuck. And so, someone who gets stuck in the mirror may also be the exact same person that avoids any reflective surfaces they possibly can. These are the sorts of things you want to look for when screening for BDD. Social anxiety disorder is not just a fear of social situations. I think it's often misunderstood that way. Social anxiety disorder is actually characterized specifically by a fear of negative evaluation. This is a fear of people thinking negatively about them, giving them negative feedback. My caveat to this, and where it can be kind of dicey, is we've also found in the research that people with social anxiety disorder can sometimes also have a fear of positive evaluation, which can feel very confusing in a clinical interview. And the theory behind this is that someone with social anxiety disorder really doesn't think much of their own abilities or performance. And so if they get positive feedback, they believe that was a fluke or a mistake. But they also believe that that has now increased the expectations in the future. And so now they're even more likely to receive negative evaluation going forward. And so this can look both like fear of negative evaluation and sometimes a fear of positive evaluation. Generalized anxiety disorder. This is one of my personal favorites. I know it's weird to have favorite disorders, but I do. This is probably the most misunderstood and mistreated diagnosis because the name of it is dumb. Like, I'm sorry. I don't know what to do about that. It's a dumb name. This idea of generalized anxiety. And so, of course, like very reasonably, people think, well, this is just generalized anxiety. It's just anxiety all over the place. It doesn't fit anywhere else. But that is not what generalized anxiety disorder is. GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, is characterized by worry. Someone with GAD would say that their go-to coping strategy is to worry. And someone with GAD is most afraid of worry because their go-to coping strategy is worry, but worry, of course, doesn't work. And someone with GAD gets sucked into the worry vortex. And if you've ever sat in the room with
But you
someone
used
with
to
GAD, you
see
started to get
everything.
sucked into the worry vortex. And you probably left that session feeling like maybe I have GAD. Clients with GAD know that they get sucked into the vortex when they start to worry. They know they lose control of the worry. And yet, worry continues to be their go-to coping strategy. Sometimes they think they're problem solving, figuring it out, but it's all worry. And so that false alarm cycle has never like spun so fast and been so tight as it is with GAD because the trigger is anything that might trigger worry. The threat is I'm gonna lose control of this worry. The neutralizing behavior is, you guessed it, worry. It's like gasoline on a fire. And so when you're looking at GAD in a client, you really want to pay attention to what their pattern of neutralizing is. If their go-to neutralizing behavior is to worry, and typically followed by avoid anything that might trigger worry, that is probably GAD. And the last one, panic disorder, is also often misunderstood as someone that has a lot of panic attacks. But that is not the essence of panic disorder. The essence of panic disorder is it is actually just a really fancy phobia. Panic disorder is a phobia of panic attacks. Anyone can have panic attacks, right? Anyone with an anxiety disorder is really likely to have panic attacks. Anyone with OCD, super likely to have panic attacks. That's not panic disorder. Panic disorder is a phobia of panic attacks. Someone who, what they're most afraid of is the panic attacks. That is panic disorder. And we're running short on time, so I'm going to pause here and answer questions, and then we'll jump into the next piece in part two.
Great. I want to make sure that we answer some of these questions that came in a little bit earlier. I think it might have been Vielsa who had asked this one. Kate, have you worked with anyone who's had anxiety due to chronic pain?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that is such a fabulous question. Honestly, it really warms my heart that someone thought to ask that question. That says such great things about the direction of our field. And I encourage everybody to think through that lens as well. So the question is, have I worked with anybody where anxiety and that false alarm comes from a place of chronic pain initially? Absolutely. If you are someone who suffers with chronic pain, the pain is very real. And the world starts to feel very dangerous because you can't control all of the elements. Do I want to sign up to do this activity? I might be okay that day, and I might be in excruciating pain that day. Decisions start to feel really scary. Every event starts to feel really uncertain and scary. And so, what can happen is when we're trying to navigate chronic pain, we can default to engaging in a lot of neutralizing behaviors, a lot of kind of bonus avoidance to try to control all of these areas of our lives and start to tighten that alarm unnecessarily. So then you end up with very real chronic pain that should never be ignored and this busted alarm where things have gotten scarier than they need to be because it started someplace very, very real. That's such a fabulous question.
And I believe it was Ben who had asked earlier if the OCD targets just one specific fear, can it still be an OCD diagnosis? Or does OCD typically touch and impact more than one specific fear or topic?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. So, one of the things I encourage all of our therapists to make sure to assess when we do our initial evaluations is not just what someone's afraid of right now, but what were they afraid of 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Um, an interesting thing about OCD that really sets it apart from other things. So it can be just one thing, but it usually isn't. It usually not only can it be multiple things at once, but the nature of the beast is that it shifts and changes over time. And I don't just mean how most disorders, change over time in terms of the symptom severity waxes and wanes, but in OCD, the content of the obsessions, the fear itself shifts and changes over time. And that's often a really telltale sign diagnostically that you have OCD. That 5 years ago they were afraid of this thing and just this one thing, and now they're afraid of this thing and just this one thing. And so we could give them like six different specific phobia diagnoses, but that would definitely do them a disservice. That's OCD. And to look for that shifting and changing. And to touch back for just a moment on something Cody mentioned earlier, um, the other one of the reasons behind that shifting and changing of OCD is that people's values tend to evolve over time, over their life. What's most important to them changes as they grow. And OCD just is always looking for low-hanging fruit. OCD doesn't care what it is. It's going to go after what you care about the most because that is low-hanging fruit. And so those are the sorts of things you want to keep in mind as you look to make these diagnoses. Great question.
And Halls had asked, well, she made a comment. She's interested in how scrupulosity plays out with neutralizing behaviors. Like, is there a way, Kate, that you balance honoring a person's spiritual tradition or their culture, but still supporting healing at the same time?
Oh, I love that. Yes. Oh, that's such a good one to go out on. Okay. Whenever I work with scrupulosity, I always use my whiteboard. I'm a big whiteboard therapist. And so I put on the whiteboard, I put a line down the middle, and I say, okay, on the left side, I want you to write the rules. Like, what are your religious rules? And they always write, lovely things like don't murder people, be honest, serve others, that sort of thing, right? And then I say, okay, on the right side of the board, I want you to write down how OCD demands that you follow these rules perfectly. And just setting that, and so those are the neutralizing behaviors on the right side, right? But framing it this way is so helpful because when we treat scrupulosity, we are never trying to pull someone away from their religion. We are doing everything we can to get them back to the religion they really have, not the fake religion that OCD has morphed it into. And so, what treatment ends up looking like is great. We're going to do exposures. This is our spoiler alert for our part two. We're going to do exposures that are all about following the rules on the left-hand side imperfectly, just like everybody else. Exposures are not about breaking their religious rules. Exposures are always going to be about following those rules imperfectly when OCD demands that you follow them perfectly.
Kate, thank you so much for the time and the effort that you put into this presentation. I echo everyone in the chat. You do such a great job at presenting, and it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, everyone, and for making time in your day to be here. Looking forward to part two.